Welcome to Promote, Profit, Publish. I'm your host, Juliet Clark, and today's guest is an editor turned book coach. And being that this is the end of August, if you're thinking about writing and publishing a book for 2025, it's time to get started, and you need a book coach to help you along the journey. But before we get started with Jessica, I want to invite you guys. This is the last week to sign up for the AI Author Academy. It is our 4-week course where we teach you about all sorts of platforms you can use to strategically build your author platform, and they're AI platforms. So you can go from platform to platform and really make your life creating content and posts and courses and all sorts of stuff. Quizzes we did last time very, very easily. It's 4 group coaching sessions during the month of September and then 4 one-on-one. So we can take what you just learned and integrate it into your platform, which I think is the stumbling block for so many people. It's easy to learn and listen, but to actually implement and execute is sometimes very daunting. So that's where we help get you started with that process. You can sign up today at aiauthoracademy.com. And our guest today is Jessica Andersen. Jessica is an editor turned book coach from the United States who moved to France one day in 2010 and never looked back. And such an interesting story. I talk to her all the time about Bayeux because when I was in France, I loved Bayeux and it's right down the street from her. Since starting her business 4 years ago, she's worked with authors all over the world on dozens of books. As the founder of Brand Book Bootcamp, she serves entrepreneurs who want to replace their content marketing with a brand book, which will position them as the go-to voice and attract ideal clients on autopilot. And of course, you know, that brand book is really all about getting your voice out there. Because one thing that Jessica and I agree on is you're not going to make much money from that book. It's how you use that brand book to bring people into those higher tickets. So stay tuned for Jessica. Welcome, Jessica. It's great to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Juliet.
So we won't do random stuff. For those of you who don't know, we had a very random conversation before this started. And we're joking about, I wonder what people would do if they could hear these random conversations we're having. So tell me a little bit about your editing background and why you decided to go from an editor to a book coach.
Oh boy. So it started back in 2020, as many of us did during COVID. I was trying to transition out of my position at the time as a front desk agent in a luxury hotel. And as part of one of our random conversations the other day, we realized that Juliet also spent time as a guest in that industry where I used to work. So that was funny. But I had, started a family and I didn't want to be beholden to the hours in luxury hospitality. And I remember speaking to a good friend of mine here who has become my unofficial career coach. And he said, what could you do all day long and then get someone to pay you for it? And I thought, books. I love books. I love reading books. I love writing books. I actually do love editing other people's writing. And that's what it kicked me off. I took a course in proofreading and I started out that way. And then actually, as I got to work with more and more clients on their books specifically, now I call them brand books. We can talk about that in a minute. They kept asking me for like higher and higher levels of editing. So Juliet, in our industry, the jargon is like copy editing and then line editing and developmental editing. And basically what that means is we're just taking a wider view every time of the manuscript. Normally, we start very high level, organizational, broad strokes, big ideas, and then we get down all the way to the end to proofreading, and that's the nitty gritty. So I had started there and I sort of worked my way back. And then I got into book coaching because I felt like it was a more easier term for people to grasp who weren't in the industry with us. It was a little more difficult I found myself having to do a lot of education with prospective clients about the different levels of editing. And to be honest, the clients I work with don't care. They just want a coach or a consultant to help them get that transformation that they're after. And they don't actually care about our industry jargon. So that's how I landed in book coaching.
Yes. So let's go to that brand because I think that's one of the things that when I get books that are outside a book developer, which we don't take many of them anymore, our books are always connected to your business in some way because, the book industry, you're not going to make a lot of money from your books, even though I know there are people out there that are like, yes, publish 72 books on Amazon and you'll make money. But it really is, how can I get them from the book into those big ticket programs? And the brand is so essential that I feel like if you don't have a guide along the way, you're going to get off track of what your brand really is many times. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. And for those of you who can't see us right now because you're listening to the podcast, I'm just nodding my head as Juliet is saying this. Absolutely. The brand is key. And it's part of the reason why I started calling these books that I work on brand books. And I also find with my authors, especially when I work with them in the very beginning stages, that the process of writing such a book, which is going to promote your business or brand in some way, or like develop your platform as a thought leader, the process of doing that, you have to get really, really clear on what your brand is and what you do in your business. So you might have thought you were clear on it before. And at that point, you were like, okay, now I got it. I'm going to write a book about it. But you'll find that the process of writing a book actually makes you get way, way, way more clear on what you do. And that's one of like the huge benefits, I think, of writing one for yourself. And then that benefit ultimately trickles down into your customers, your clients, people that you help, because they're going to be able to see, oh, that person made this for me, not just the book, which is a low ticket item. It's like $10, $20, whatever. But they also made this other offer for me. And that's going to be your high ticket offer. That's going to be 4 figures. And as Julia alluded to just now, that's really where the money's at. So when you write the book, you get an alignment with what you're selling on the back end of that book. And you let your readers know exactly that you made this book and this high ticket offer for them.
Yes, yes. And what I find a lot too is that people will come in and they'll say, oh, I had my lead magnet, I had my landing page, but it was for something else. And they're always a little bit put off, like, well, we have to create something here to build the list for the book that's in alignment with the book and the next steps. And a lot of times they just kind of throw their hands up. They're like, well, I didn't know this was going to be this much work. But it really is one of those things where that platform, that messaging working with a book coach sets the tone for the platform as well, because that coach knows where you're going, you know where you're going. So how do you keep those people? First of all, how do you get them to discern what their brand actually is? Because so many people think a brand is colors and a logo, and it's so much more.
No, it is. It's so much more. It's absolutely everything. I have a lot of things I could say about your question, but I would, first of all, start with the end in mind, reverse engineer your book. What is the one high ticket offer that you would say, or that you would want to be, is your signature offer, whether that's one-on-one or a program or what have you, like the absolute showstopper in your offer lineup. And then get that in alignment with your book and vice versa. The other thing I would say is to work with a professional who is business oriented in how they help their clients, because you could go to work with a different book editor who might work on quote unquote business books. But if their specialty is only in the words, I don't think they're going to have quite as much of like a bird's eye view and a holistic view about your brand and what you're trying to achieve. Yes, to your point about what is a brand, it's so much more than font choices and colors and a logo. It should be instantly recognizable, like you're trying to build a household name.
Right.
But not just visually, like it does, like a lot of it is found in the copy and in how you show up online or in person, depending on how you reach your followers, your audience, clients, and customers. Like I said, it's holistic. It's all encompassing.
Yeah, it definitely is. And people are looking for you to be in alignment when they meet you with those things that you're putting out online. I've mentioned this before. Many years ago, I had a high-end prostitute as a client. Never met her, but I had this idea about how skanky it would be. Met her in person. She was lovely, but her stuff out there was a little raunchy. So I was kind of surprised when I met her how elegant and beautiful she was. And we had to talk about, there are definitely ways that you can improve the way you're appearing online. So just kind of, you need to be that person when people meet you in person that they're like, oh my God, you're exactly like I thought you'd be.
Oh, I love that analogy. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, when you get into building that brand book, I know you've mentioned that you need deadlines. And I think that's what's a coach is really good at. Cause I don't know how many times I've heard somebody say, oh, I'm writing a book. And I'll ask them like, where are you at in the book? Oh, chapter 1. Oh, when did you start it? 5 years ago. So they're continually rewriting chapter 1 and nobody's ever going to publish it. It'll never be finished. So tell me why the deadlines are so important to keep people moving.
Exactly, Juliet. If you never finish your book, you can't publish it. So I don't want to throw shade on the coaches out there who don't impose deadlines. There are some like quote unquote, I'll say like manufactured deadlines. It's like, oh, you have to pay my invoice by X date. That's like a soft deadline in a way for writers. Because I'm friends with many of these coaches online. That's fine for them if they want to work like that. However, like you said, in my experience, I've noticed that when people book a book coach for, let's say, 3 months of quote unquote book coaching, and there's no clear defined transformation of what they're going to achieve in those 3 months. And it's very open ended, go at your own pace. It's totally go with the flow. I'm like, I get that people have other things going on in their lives. I totally do. You might be caring for someone. You might be in school, like going back for a degree. You have your own business, you have your family, whatever. I understand that. But if you have decided to become an entrepreneur, for example, and you're growing a business, that's a trade-off that you make. If you decide to write a book, that's a trade-off that you make. And I wonder how much time you're wasting without a hard deadline driving you to actually complete the book. Because the longer it takes you to do that, the longer it's going to take you to see those high ticket sales come in on the back end. One thing I would add is about a year ago, exactly a year ago, I embarked on an experiment and I asked my audience, I actually interviewed, I think 25 people in my audience who took me up on this. And I asked them, how long do you think it would take you to write a book? Because they hadn't written their brand book yet. And the results were fascinating. I had a couple people say 30 days to write it, which was like, I was like, no, that's too fast. You're scaring me. And other people said 5 years. And then I had a whole bunch of responses in between. I don't have a whole lot of nuance in explaining those answers, why people felt like they could do it in 30 days and why others felt like it would take them 5 years. But I'm guessing it had something to do with what else they had on their plate and their level of like just decision. I'm going to do this thing. This is going to be the Olympic Games of writing my brand book, like that kind of energy versus, oh, I'll just go with the flow and we'll see. I'll get it done. Like I'll find little pockets of time. I can't do that when I'm writing for myself. Yeah. So what I love doing with my clients is establishing very clear mini transformations within a larger one, and then establishing a deadline. And what you can't do with me, if you hire me one-on-one, is you can't like reapply and work with me for another 3 months after. Like if we establish we're working for 6 months, that's 6 months. Good. If you don't finish it, like, I guess you're on your own after that. That might sound harsh for some people, but it's really very motivating. And I find that I get results from my clients because of it.
You know, what's interesting about that is I've noticed since about 2020 that many of the book coaches that I work with also, they're not doing what you're doing, but they're changing their fee structure. So it's X amount a month. And so if you're not performing, you're basically wasting money. And if you're a good entrepreneur, you're going to, that's going to have an impact on you because we're all looking at ROI.
That's good on those people, those editors who are, or coaches rather, who are charging that way. They're protecting themselves. That's looking after their businesses as service providers. It's not looking out for the client though. That's where I have a problem with it. I mean, other people might think differently, and I feel like there's room at the table for different points of view on that. But personally, it doesn't sit right with me to work that way. I want to make sure that the client is getting a result when they work with me.
Yeah. And I mean, it's all good, however they choose to do it, because different people are going to want to be motivated in different ways. So, I do like that as well. So when it comes to prioritizing your marketing assets with this, how do people work with you on that? Or, do you do any marketing at all?
Oh, very high level. Julia, I send them to you for that. Like you're all over in my
Well,
in my group
I know,
program.
but a lot of times you're doing the messaging. So I want to get your feedback on this, because you talked about reverse engineering. And
Mhm.
I will tell you, almost every nonfiction book that I write, I actually create the course, record it, and give it first, because then I have transcripts to work from. How do you feel about that? Because I feel, for me, number one, it helps me. My thoughts have to be in order. And it's easier to edit from transcripts than it is to sit down and write from scratch. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, as a writer, I know my limitations. I'm a storyteller and a really bad writer. So I think it helps my editors as well, because then I can give them the work product and say, okay, fix it, fix me. So what are your thoughts about that? Because I feel like it takes care of the monetization first and then works back into it. You may feel differently because you may hate the courses.
No, absolutely not. I can't speak from personal experience just because I wrote a brand book myself, but it was for a completely different like business and brand that I've now let go of. So in my current one, I don't actually have a brand book for this one. And I've been meaning to do it, but I'm just like everybody else, I guess. I should go hire a book coach to help me write it. But I will say when I developed my course, I put in a lot of work up front. It's definitely based on how I've already helped my one-on-one clients. And I just wanted to make it into a framework that said, okay, this is a system and it's going to help you if you fall into this category A, B, or C. And then I live launched it and I sort of built it out, I guess, in a co-creation type way. But let's see, you asked me more about your book, right? And then sending it to your editor. I think that's very smart to obviously start with the end in mind. You know your business best and you're in this business, so you know that your brand book is going to be automatically aligned. And I know that ghostwriters also work from transcripts as well. Me as an editor, I find it extremely difficult to
Really?
edit transcripts. I find it extremely difficult. I'm much better at like just writing.
Oh, interesting. Oh, actually, I do write from the transcripts. I will go in and put my personal stories and things like that in. What the reason I do it that way is because then I'm
Hmm.
getting feedback along the way. So, if my students come in like they always do and say, you hosed us, like there's so much information here, then I kind of know where to cut, where not to cut. And,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can't even, with a brand book too, Jessica, I feel like, there's an audience out there. About 90% of them will try a few things and then they'll give up. And then there's going to be that group that's successful, very small, and then another group that's just going to hire you because they gave up. Sort of. So I think
Sure.
where that comes from too.
Mm-hmm.
And people are always afraid. Do you experience where they're afraid to like give it all because they think that nobody will hire them?
Nobody will hire them.
Well, yeah, I run across it a lot where people will say, "Well, I don't want to put all my secrets in the book, my book,
Okay. They don't
because
want to
then
give away
nobody
the
will
farm and
hire
the
me."
book.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but I don't think they
No.
understand that most people like they won't execute. How many times have you read a self-help book and you haven't executed?
Okay. I see where you're going. Yes. Every time, Juliet. Every single time. Every single client I've worked with, probably every brand book I've ever read, like for fun. Yes. Please don't ever be afraid to give away the farm with your book. In fact, give away the farm with your book. Be really generous because a book is a long form piece of content. It's meant to be very nurturing, especially if you're doing an audiobook and then your future clients and customers have you in their ears. It's even more like intimate and nurturing. People will go away from your book and they will implement like the minimum. And then they're going to find that it's quite difficult to do it on their own. So then they're going to look at other solutions, how to go deeper in that transformation with you. Maybe it's a self-study course, which in itself is still DIY, but it's still in your offer suite, right? So they could take the course and then they might love it so much. They might have gotten results from it, but they might have loved it so much that they would like to upgrade to work with you one-on-one. And the only difference there could be level of support because they feel that closeness to you. So being generous is never going to like ruin your business.
Right.
I would never be afraid of that.
You actually brought up a really good point about reading your own book. If you have the voice for it, I think that's a fabulous idea, is being that audible reader and putting your voice in their head. I think that's the benefit of podcasting too, or a YouTube channel, is now your voice is in somebody's head and they're expecting you to read that book. I interviewed Juliet Clark several years ago, and that was one of my questions, is her first book, her publisher had somebody else read. Her second book she read, and it just was so much more intimate. It just was authoritative as well, because it's like, she's talking to me. She's speaking directly to me.
Sure. I mean, we all talk, right? Now, recording is another skill, but it's a skill that you can learn how to do. And there are service providers out there who will help you do that. You just have to choose sort of like which way you want to go. Do you want to pay to hire a voice actor to read your book in not exactly the right way you might have read it, and obviously not your voice at all, to nurture your audience? Or would you rather pay someone to help you learn the skill in order for you to do it yourself? There's no right or wrong. I think you can tell what my preference is, but that's just me.
Well, too, we work with an audiobook provider that gives you a producer so you can read your own book, which I do think is really beneficial. But I understand the skill you're talking about, because I tried to read my first book and I have so much appreciation for the breath work that goes into being a voice actor. Oh my gosh.
I know. Juliet, I have my 2 young daughters and I trade with my husband every night who's going to read a story to them. And yeah, sometimes I find myself out of breath even after reading children's books. Some of them are in French, to be fair, and those are really, really hard. But we push through.
Oh, they're in French. So did you know French already before you went to France in 2010?
I did. It was my major. So actually, this is a good analogy. I learned French throughout school. I started at 13, so I was at middle school, and then I made it my major in college. So by the time I came to France, it was my study abroad semester, and I had already a very good foundation, like academic French, some conversational French as well. But my real life French, like on the streets French, was not good at all. So I once had, for example, a cavity. I was living here and I'm like, how the heck do I call my dentist and say I have a cavity? I don't know. I'm just going to be like, you're the professional. Look in my mouth. You can tell what's wrong with it. But it's similar to writing, because when we're in school, we're taught a very certain way of writing. It's like very academic. And then when we join the business world, it becomes very corporate sounding. And that's not at all what we're doing with brand books. So to your point earlier about editing from transcripts, it's also very smart to talk your book out if you're struggling with writing it, because it's going to sound more like you and more conversational, which is what we want actually in a brand book, because we're not out to write a best-selling novel, for example, and we're certainly not out to write a white paper or a textbook or anything like that. It has to resonate with people.
Right.
You have to be on their level. So I don't like when people say, write like you speak, because of course we use filler words and we make mistakes all the time when we speak. But just from the point of view that humans evolved to first listen and then speak. So we had the oral tradition. That's where storytelling comes from. And that's like the greatest tool in our toolbox when we're writing brand books. So that's sort of where your writing voice should come from when you're writing a brand book.
Yeah. And my editor will tell you I write exactly how I speak, which drives her crazy. But it's what my audience expects from me. So I don't, a long time ago, we had a marketing boo-boo that was so transformative in people showing up for webinars. My assistant sent out an email and there was a word in there that the wrong usage of it. So I would say like, what do you call the words that are pair and pair? So
Dominance?
Yeah, I think they're homonyms. So we used the wrong one in there. And I got all
Okay.
these emails back like, you shouldn't be in it. You shouldn't be a publisher. You can't spell, blah, on and on and on. And it really ticked me off. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I sent out an email on my own, which just shocked the heck out of my assistant at the time. And I literally wrote, the webinars tomorrow. Here's the deal, guys. You can pick apart my grammar. You can pick apart my English. You can pick apart anything you want. But if you don't build a platform, nobody's going to read your book. So show up tomorrow or not. I had the biggest audience I had ever had for a webinar that day. It was frustrating because, they're picking at these little things, but if nobody reads your book, like, it's all for
I have
naught.
thoughts. First of all, I'm going to steal that strategy for my next webinar. Thank you. Second of all,
Dirtbag. You think you're going to write a book? No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, I would have to say I used to be one of those people because I started out as a proofreader, and any little typo or error like that used to really bother me, but now it doesn't at all. And I've realized that because the goal is to build a know-like trust factor, nurture your audience, and then ultimately, yes, the long-term goal is to sell your offers down the road. I've realized that honestly, the typos and the mistakes, they don't matter that much. To a certain degree, right? Your book can't be riddled with them, of course. Like, please hire a professional proofreader. However, I would say, maybe you will disagree, you'll let me know. But if you have people in your audience who are picking apart either your marketing copy, like on social media, or your brand book has a few typos in it, if they're picking that apart, if they're homing in on that and focusing on that and complaining about that, probably not your ideal client and customer in the end.
That is absolutely true because they're picking apart, I would say, especially with self-help books. I see this because my books basically are self-help for platform building. If they're doing that, they're avoiding the bigger issue and topic. And
they're missing the point, and it's
yeah.
unfortunate for them.
Yeah. And with self-help books, like if you've got a divorce book, you're in big trouble if you're picking apart the grammar and not doing the healing exercises. Like, you're really missing the point there. So you have a program coming up next month. Do you want to share it with us and where people can find it and grab a call with you or grab the program?
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't quite started the marketing for it yet. We're sort of on the ramp up to that. But it's called the Profitable Brand Book Program. The profitable part is obviously important because I do want people to sell their high ticket offers at the end. And this program actually is a self-study with some group support because I'm going to live launch it. I'll explain what that means in a second. But it takes my clients through the writing of their brand book from start to finish. Because, like I said in the beginning of our interview, clients kept asking me for help during that stage. And I wanted a way for myself to help as many people with that as possible. And because I got those people saying, oh, it'll take me 30 days, and other people saying, oh, it'll take me 5 years, I was like, okay, I want to crystallize my framework in a course where people can get to it when they can, because that's what they're asking for. If you work with me one-on-one, I'm going to hold you to a deadline. But if that's not your thing, you can still choose to work with me in the program. You will get some group support for the first 12 weeks that you join. And then after that, it's going to be you're on your own, DIYing it, the self-study. You get 5 modules in there, and it's going to help you, plan, brainstorm, outline. I have templates for you, and then write the book. And like I said before, very, very high level marketing help in there. Nothing like what you do. Please go to Juliet for that. She's the best. But what else was I going to say about that? So yeah, if you want to get in on the program in September when the doors open for enrollment, it will be a really good time because after that, the price is going to increase and you will still get lifetime access to the program. That means you can literally take a lifetime to write your book if you want.
Well, hopefully you won't. So if they
Hopefully
want to,
not.
if this sounds interesting to them, I know this is coming out before you open the doors. Where do they go? Do you want to get on your calendar? It sounds like you don't have a site up yet for it. But do you want them to
Yes, if you want to join my email list, which I shared the link with Juliet ahead of this, but it's basically, if you want to join my email list, I'm going to give you a quick profit calculator with a little video explainer to show you exactly how you can get your brand book in alignment with your other offers in your business, and then sort of project the kind of revenue that you can make. And you'll see, as Juliet said, that the riches, quote unquote, are not in the copies of the book that you sell, but it's about the offers that you're selling after that to your readers on the back end. I will let Juliet post the link wherever, because it's not one of those pretty links. Unfortunately, I'm just a little bit behind on those.
So, no, that's great, because I think people are going to find that you're not going to get ROI, return on investment, for those people who don't know ROI. You're not going to get it from the publishing package. You're going to get it on what you sell next. So it is really important. I'm excited about that. Jessica, thank you so much for being on today. And
this was a blast. Thank you so much, Juliet, for our conversation. I feel really fired up, and it's 10:30 p.m. my time. I'm not going to bed anytime soon.
You should go to sleep. Why aren't you at the Olympics?
Oh, I'm not setting foot in Paris during the Olympics. No, ma'am. I was there earlier this month, and I was like, I'm getting in right before. I hit up all the bookstores. I was with a LinkedIn buddy who's also a book coach, and I met up with another LinkedIn buddy who's also a proofreader. It was a fabulous time.
That is so funny. When I lived in Los Angeles and the Olympics were there, I went on vacation. So,
oh yeah, you see, yeah, you're like me.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Juliet.